Good morning. My name is Annie Morris, and I'll be leading today's service. Reverend Matt Alspaugh will be presenting our message from North Carolina this morning. Our opening words this morning are by the Unitarian Universalist minister, Mark Bellatini. This is called Exultate for Easter. I could say they are beautiful, those stars hemming the blue veil of morning. I could say it gives me pleasure, that bronze and perfect Passover moon. I could say they make me glad, those laughing daffodils along the way. Or I could just as well say they are lit from within, divine, overflowing with what some long to call revelation, or even the growing vision of God. But today on Easter, I don't care which words I use to express my wonder. I'm just glad to be alive, blessed with such marvels. I could say that the earth hanging in space is an accident in the universe that just happened, or I could say it's one more miracle in a cosmos full of miracles, one overflowing with divinity. But today, on Easter, for all of my education and life experience, I cannot tell which word is which. Accident, miracle, they seem to see each other's face in the mirror of my heart. And so I rise in gladness again and sing for the marvel that everything is. When some argue for heaven and others argue for earth, for the life of me, I cannot comprehend the seriousness of the debate. After all, the heaven I see daily overhead never argues with me. It just tumbles clouds through my eyes and yours and paints the horizons pink and orange, come evening or come morning. And the earth I walk on never argues with me either. It mostly just explodes with buds and petals like some out of control fountain. Heaven and earth remain silent even when people malign the ancient exclamation, "Oh God," by fusing it with violence and entitlement. But now, on this Easter day, everything grows beyond words, beyond earth and heaven, into a necessary vision of harmony and peace for all humankind who rise into life that is alive. And so I just want to welcome you with live from Fellowship Hall. It's our LCUUF Sunday service. Our announcements were on a slideshow before the service. If you didn't see them this morning, they were sent out Saturday with the order of service. A few notes. Our building is now open to everyone. We will continue offering our service on Zoom as we welcome people to the building. We ask people here to continue to wear masks in the building to help prevent the spread of breakout COVID infections. And now a special welcome to our visitors. If you are visiting with us for the first time or have returned or reconnected with us after a long absence, we invite you to say your name and tell us where you're from. If you are on Zoom, use the Zoom raise hand feature or just turn your video on and wave your hand, and we'll ask you to unmute. If you are in the room, just raise your hand. We'll start with the people in the room.
I'm Christine Reynolds, and we're from Tulsa, Oklahoma, All Souls Unitarian Church.
He says, I'm with her. Now let's switch to those on Zoom. For anyone new with us on Zoom. Our chalice lighting words today are by Annie Forster. Come we now out of the darkness of our unknowing and the dusk of our dreaming. Come we now from far places. Come we now into the twilight of our awakening and the reflection of our gathering. Come we now all together. We bring unilluminated our dark caves of doubting. We seek unbedazzled the clear light of understanding. May the sparks of our joining kindle our resolve, brighten our spirits, reflect our love, and unshadow our days. Come now, enter the dawning. Now let us light our chalice with these words that we sing together. We kindle this light in celebration.
We kindle this light in celebration for the life that we share.
Our hymn is number 61, Lo, the Earth Wakens Again. Each week, we take time to remind ourselves that we belong to a community which cares for each other. We do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow to share today, you can type it into the chat now, and we'll read those aloud. First, let us voice our sorrows or concerns, whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts. You are welcome to type sorrows and concerns in the chat box. First, we'll start with the folks here to give you on Zoom a time to type. Are there any sorrows or concerns that people would like to share here in the room?
Again, a thought about the poor people in Ukraine.
Are there any sorrows to be shared on Zoom?
Yes, there are. From Ellen McFarland, please light a candle of concern for my grandson who had a second surgery Friday on his leg. And from Elizabeth Katz, I have a joy and a concern. I join everyone in rejoicing that Janice Kimball is recovering. That's a joy. On Monday morning, I will learn what procedure surgery is necessary to repair the detached retina in my right eye. It's considered an emergency situation, so possibly the procedure or surgery will happen on Monday, but if not, then soon thereafter this coming week. Leanne and I ask for your loving support. That's it.
Okay.
Hold
Now
it,
let us recall
hold
the
it, hold
joys.
it, hold it.
Whatever you may
Okay.
be celebrating, whatever evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourselves and others, you are welcome to type joys in the chat box. Again, we'll start with the folks here. Are there any joys that people would like to share here in the room?
Today, my son turns 41, and I adopted him when he was 2 months old, right out of the hospital in Acapulco.
Hola, good morning. My name is Francisco Ursua. My joy is because my mother, Janice Kimball, last Thursday had surgery on her. The doctor put 2 stents in her hair. Now she has 4 stents in her hair. She will be live longer. Thank you.
I'm Evelyn. I found a house in Chicala, so I'm here to stay.
Are there any joys to be
Yes, there are. We have from Devorah Kelly 2 joys. My 98-year-old mother has made a successful move to Ahiek from Florida. She is receiving loving care at La Paloma. And also, this coming Thursday, my son, his wife, and my 10-year-old grandson are coming for a week. So all is good on the family front. From Linda Jessen, there is a joy. We are safely back in Canada, and yesterday we celebrated Peter's 82nd birthday. And from Catherine Luria, a joy. We had a successful trip to Portland, and our rented townhouse is very nice. wonderful to be with the family again. We enjoyed an English country dance ball last night. And that's it.
And this candle from our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, losses that remain present with us every day. So many of us have burdens, anger, fear, and frustration, all of those things that weigh heavy on our hearts. We light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows. This is the time in our service when we ask that you remember that we share our gifts here through pledging and donations. Instructions for payments to the fellowship are on a slide during the announcements before the service every week. For the people here at the fellowship, we'll pass a basket. And while you're considering your gifts to the fellowship, remember that each month, LCUUF donates 5,000 pesos or more to an organization in our Lakeside community. We share one half of the offering collected at the fellowship each week with that organization. For the month of April, we will be supporting Poco a Poco San Pedro Itzican. This organization supports youth and women in this indigenous area through education, teaching local organic food growth, providing food and drinking water to renal patients, feeding over 300 children 5 days a week, offering health services, as well as literacy and English as a second language classes. If you are not attending the fellowship in person, please donate to Share the Basket when you pay your pledge. Donate to Share the Basket separately or indicate what part of your donation is for Share the Basket. The offering will now be given and received. And it's received.
Good morning. I want to invite you into a time of silent meditation, a time to just kind of catch up with the pace of your life, a time to just rest in just the awareness of being. And so you might just settle into your chair or wherever you're at, find yourself centered, find yourself grounded. Just get comfortable with your body, with yourself, and bring your attention to your breath, the in breath and the out breath, the in breath and the out breath. And let's just spend a minute or two noticing that breath, returning to the breath whenever the mind drifts away.
No.
And let us return to this time and this place to be together again.
Our reading today is Praise the Earth by Janet Bush. Praise the earth, all its creatures. Praise the earth, all plants and minerals. Praise the earth, all rivers and mountains. Praise the earth, all deserts and forests. Praise her from whom we come. Praise her in whom we live. She causes the nesting birds to return and the bulbs to awaken and send forth shoots. She causes the grain to rise up and the rice to fill its paddies. She causes green to green and red to redden, and the fruits of vine and tree to ripen. The winds and clouds are her robes, and the rainbow her veil. She sings to the stars and moon by night. Her sister planets sing with her. Together they dance around the sun. Do not test her patience, for at her core she is molten. Her passion will overcome you with miasma and flame. Tread on her gently, treat her with honor. Treat her with honor as a child its grandmother. Praise her from whom we come. Praise her in whom we live.
It's springtime and the earth is awakening. We just sang about that with Lo, the Earth Awakes Again, which is true if you happen to live in the northern hemisphere. We'll just ignore the folks like my sisters who live near the Southern Ocean and who are now enjoying autumn times as a respite after the dryness and the fires of the Australian summer. It's springtime and the earth is awakening. That's also true if you live in a temperate climate. But here in Mexico, our tropical climate is dominated by a wet season and a dry season, and we're still very much in the midst of the dry season. I think somebody mentioned that they heard the rainbirds, the cicadas for the first time this season, the harbingers of the wet season coming. So while there are hints of the earth awakening, those cicadas getting ready for the wet season, those hints are subtle. A few vine tendrils growing down, a few buds swelling on dry branches, getting ready for the rich growth that will be possible when the rains come. Awakening is coming to our part of Mexico, but it's not here yet. And yet we celebrate. This Friday is Earth Day, the annual manifestation, protest, and celebration of the earth and the importance of protecting our ambient environment. I know that Ajijic is holding a three-day festival for Earth Day in the plaza this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and that many of you are planning to participate. Earth Day awakens us to the importance of caring for the earth, and it helps us discover actions we can take, small and large, to care for our local environment, our neighborhoods, the lake, as well as the whole world, the climate, the oceans, and the interconnected web of life. And in caring for the earth, we are reminded, sometimes in surprising ways, that the earth can care for us. Eve Ensler, playwright and activist, perhaps best known for her 1998 play, The Vagina Monologues, describes a transformation that occurred for her as a result of her experience with uterine cancer. This is from her book, The Body of the World. She describes herself before her cancer saying, I have been exiled from my body. I have been afraid of trees. I have felt the earth as my enemy. I did not live in forests. I lived in a concrete city where I could not see the sky or sunset or stars. I became a stranger to myself and the rhythms of the earth. Now let's take that in for a moment and dwell on it. I became a stranger to myself and the rhythms of the earth. But Ensler was not unaware of her estrangement. She goes on. For years, I've been trying to find my way back to my body and to the earth. I guess you could say it has been a preoccupation. Although I have felt pleasure in both the earth and my body, it has been more as a visitor than as an inhabitant. I've tried various routes to get back: promiscuity, anorexia, performance art. And then in 2010, cancer came to Ensler with surgery, chemo, and all the difficulties of treatment. But there was also transformation which came through the window of her hospital room. She writes, "What I hadn't anticipated was the tree. I was too weak to think or write or call or even watch a movie. All I could do was stare at the tree, which was the only thing in my view. At first, it annoyed me and I thought I'd go mad from boredom. But after the first days and many hours, I began to see the tree. On Tuesday, I meditated on bark. On Friday, the green leaves shimmering in late afternoon light. For hours, I lost myself, my body, my being dissolving into tree." Now, this was something new for Ensler. This was a shift in how she saw the world. She writes, "I was raised in America. All value lies in the future, in the dream, in production. There is no present tense. There is no value in what is, only in what might be made or exploited from what already exists. Of course, the same was true for me. I had no inherent value. Without work or effort, without making myself into something significant, without proving my worth, I had no right or reason to be here. Life itself was inconsequential unless it led to something, unless the tree would be wood, would be house, would be table. What value was there to tree? So to actually lie in my hospital bed and see tree, enter the tree, and find the green life inherent in tree, this was the awakening. Each morning I opened my eyes. I could not wait to focus on tree. I would let the tree take me. Each day it was different, based on the light or wind or rain. The tree was a tonic and a cure, a guru and a teaching. There was the tree, my tree. Not that I owned it. I had no desire for that. But it had become to be my friend, my point of connection and meditation, my new reason to live. I was not writing or producing or on the phone or making anything happen. I was not contributing much more than my appreciation of tree, my love of green, my commitment to trunk and bark, my celebration of branch, my insane delight over the gentle white May blossoms that were beginning to flower everywhere." Matt here. When I worked in the hospital as a chaplain, there had been some recent studies that showed that patients got better faster in hospital rooms that had windows facing nature rather than in rooms that faced built structures. Surprisingly, even pictures of nature helped, but they had to be photographs, not paintings. So we began to put photos of nature everywhere. I hadn't thought of the connection, the wholeness, the awakening that nature, that trees, even pictures of trees might offer. Might nature simply be saying to us all along, you are part of me, you are worthy just as you are? And might our awakening come from rediscovering, reaffirming this reality, this relationship? And for this reason, might we be wise to praise the earth, to treat her with honor as a child might treat his grandmother? Might we praise the earth, not only from whom we come, but from whom we can be transformed?
Today's reading is by Reverend Meg Barnhouse, a Unitarian Universalist minister who explores the unique difficulty we have with Easter. This is an excerpt from the Honey Springs Worship Committee Plans Its Easter Service, written in 2010. She writes, "The worship planning group at Honey Springs Unitarian Universalist Congregation, a mythical UU congregation where we are all the way we are, only more so, was seated around the table in classroom 6, discussing the upcoming Easter intergenerational service. Someone had put a scented candle in the chalice, and the room was beginning to list a little to the raspberry side. The Reverend Cotton Lovingood was having a little trouble breathing and briefly wondered if it would be seen as sacrilegious to ask if they could put the chalice out for the rest of the meeting. Mindful of his previous 2 very brief settlements in seminary and wanting to have a brightly successful ministry here at Honey Springs, he decided to endure. "It's in the name," a tall woman dressed in gauzy green layers was saying. "Easter is from Öster or Ostara, the Saxon goddess of spring. In ancient Greece, she was called Astarte. In Assyria, she was called Ishtar. Hear it? Easter, Ishtar. It's the same word. Her worshippers would have egg hunts at dawn on the day of the equinox, and the rabbits were sacred to her too." She looked at the minister. "Easter is about Jesus, people." A slender young man leaned both our forearms on the table. "Why is it so hard just to let the church talk about Jesus once in a while? Is Honey Springs going to be like that place where the only time the name of Jesus is uttered is when the minister stubs his toe?"
Today is Easter. It's the big day, the biggest day in the annual cycle of Christian holidays. Since both our Unitarian and our Universalist forebears were Christian, it's good for us to acknowledge the day. And yet it's a challenging day for many of us. We don't know what to make of this day, how to celebrate it, as the excerpt from Meg Barnhouse's story suggests. If nothing more, Easter calls up the diversity of beliefs that we hold as Unitarian Universalists. There are some among us, I know, who don't believe that Jesus existed at all, that the whole story is a hoax, a humongous conspiracy theory. And at the other extreme, there may be Unitarian Universalists, I'm not sure I've met any, who are high Christologists. That is, they believe that Jesus is in fact divine, and that the variety of miraculous events, in particular the resurrection, did in fact occur and prove the divinity of Jesus. And there, we're just talking about the people's beliefs about Christianity. We haven't talked about pagan beliefs or anything else. I think some of others of us find ourselves somewhere in the middle. That is, that we think that Jesus most likely existed, that he taught, he went to Jerusalem for Passover week. I mean, remember, he was a Jew. And there he tried to stir things up and he was executed by the authorities. It was his followers who amped him up with stories about miracles, water into wine, bread and fishes, and rising up from the dead. We find sympathy with Bible historian Bart Ehrman. Ehrman opens his book, How Jesus Became God, with these lines, I quote, "Jesus was a lower-class Jewish preacher from the backwaters of rural Galilee who was condemned for illegal activities and crucified for crimes against the state. Yet not long after his death, his followers were claiming he was a divine being. Eventually, they went even further, declaring he was none other than God, Lord of heaven and earth." We find the story of Jesus interesting primarily for his teachings, just as we find wisdom in the teachings of other religious leaders. Siddhartha Gautama, better known as the Buddha, Muhammad, Black Elk, among numerous others. We also find the story of Jesus interesting because how that story is told explains much about the evolution of the early Christian church. As various parts of the story are emphasized or de-emphasized or even deleted altogether, we learn what was important to the people who formed and led the early Christian church, as well as the numerous Christian sects that exist today. What do I mean? Let me give you a brief example. If you open most any version of the Bible, except maybe the oldest ones like the King James Version, and you turn to the last chapter of the Gospel of Mark, that is Mark chapter 12, you'll read how Mary Magdalene and 2 other women go to the tomb where the dead Jesus was put in order to anoint him with oil and spices. This was a thing they did back then. They'd find the stone blocking the tomb was rolled away, and a man dressed in white waiting for them. He tells them that Jesus is not there. He's been raised, and he'll see the disciples back home in Galilee. And the women flee from the tomb in terror, and they don't say anything to anyone. That's it. Now, at this point, you will encounter some footnote, some heading, or some other indication that the earliest versions of the Gospel of Mark, that book, simply end right there. That Mark's story of Jesus ends with the women leaving and telling no one. Later versions add on all kinds of stuff, with Jesus coming back and visiting Mary and the disciples, with believers speaking in tongues, with snake handling, all that stuff. What I want to note here is that what appears as the earliest version of this story, this Gospel of Mark, the one that was most likely to have been factual, subsequently gets doctored up with later various editions and later versions. What's interesting here is to ask why these changes. One possibility is that some of Jesus's followers, grieving, confused, worried about their futures, did have visions in which Jesus appeared to them after his death, offering comfort and guidance. That's not so miraculous. Many people, even today, have visions of loved ones appearing after they've died. People in my family have had this happen. And the Apostle Mark just simply mentions those visions about Jesus. But later editors found this story insufficient. They wanted a punchier, more powerful story. So they edited the ending, adding in all the miraculous stuff. So Jesus became less and less human and more divine. And the Christian church becomes more and more focused on life after death rather than life here on earth. What can we make of Easter then? Can we take anything useful from that original story? Possibly it is an awakening, an invitation to pay attention to something, just as those early disciples may have had mystical visions of their teacher appearing before them. And just as Eve Ensler had an awakening with a tree outside her hospital room as a guru, perhaps we too might attend to the visions, the illuminations, the awakenings that appear before us. And the main point is to pay attention. Such visitations, such mystical moments are fleeting, and we can miss them if we don't pay attention. That great Irish poet, John O'Donoghue, put it this way: no day is ever the same, and no day stands still. Each one moves through a different territory, awakening new beginnings. The day moves forward in moments, and once a moment has flickered into life, it vanishes and is replaced by the next. It is fascinating that this is where we live, within an emerging lacework that continually unravels. Often a fleeting moment can hold a whole sequence of the future in distilled form. That unprepared second, when you looked into a parent's eye and saw death already beginning to loom. Or the second you noticed a softening in someone's voice and you knew a friendship was beginning. Or catching your partner's gaze upon you and knowing the love that surrounded you. Each day is seeded with recognitions. And so might we too pay attention, noticing these little recognitions, these fleeting moments, and awaken to those new beginnings that such moments offer us. May it be so.
Let us extinguish our chalices with these words, which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world. Our closing hymn is number 269, Lo, the Day of Days is Here. Our closing words are by Reverend Scott Taylor. May it stay with you, this awakening, this beautiful grasp of who you truly are, never alone, always worthy, graced with a unique gift that the world surely needs. And if you lose it, if it slips through your busy fingers or is drowned out by the noise of the world, remember, you can always retrieve it here in this tender temple of equally forgetful friends who are always ready to sing you back to yourself. Amen.